Tish Media. Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight I have a truly chilling collection of scary stories that happened while alone at night. So get uncomfortable and let the darkness take control. It was past midnight when my flight landed, and exhaustion clouded my judgment. The area surrounding this airport was unfamiliar to me, and the thought of navigating a new city in the dark was incredibly daunting. My destination was 3 hours away, and there were no other airports nearby, so my only choice was to drive. I started going, but was falling asleep at the wheel, and I realized I needed to stop somewhere. After a few minutes, I spotted a neon sign, flickering vacancy atop a dilapidated building.
I had a 10 a.m. meeting, and at 11:00 a.m. I desperately needed some sleep, even a little, along with a shower. The hotel lobby offered no respite. A thick, musty odor, a mix of mildew and possibly urine, hung heavy in the air. Peeling wallpaper exposed stained plaster beneath.
A dusty ceiling fan rotated sluggishly, doing little to combat the oppressive heat. The gaunt, sunken-eyed receptionist barely acknowledged me, muttering room 204 and sliding a tarnished key across the counter. This should have been my first warning. The hallway was dim and narrow, its threadbare carpet muffling my footsteps. Faint sounds echoed, distant voices. A television in one of the rooms. Room 204's door was scuffed, with deep scratches near the handle. I inserted the key, and with a reluctant creak, the door swung open. The room was a nightmare. The air was stale and warm, carrying the same offensive odor from the lobby. The walls were marred with unidentifiable stains, and the ceiling showed several spots of water damage. A single dim bulb flickered overhead, casting unsettling shadows. The bed was unmade, the sheets crumpled and stained, and a closer inspection revealed an imprint on the mattress, as if someone had been lying there just moments before. As you can tell, I wasn't impressed. I'm not exactly picky, but this is exactly how the room was given to me. I checked the bathroom, and GR coated the sink, and the mirror was cracked. The toilet seat was up, and the bowl hadn't been flushed, and a small brown gift floated in the bowl. Disgusted, I returned to the bedroom, contemplating my options. I looked at my watch. 1:43. My meeting was at 10. I did some mental maths and wondered if it'd just be easier to sleep in my car. But I looked down at that filthy pillow and decided to sleep on top of the covers, fully clothed, using my backpack as a pillow instead. And I knew I was going to pass out in moments, but I felt uneasy. Something about this room didn't make me feel very comfortable, and so I grabbed the chair from the corner and wedged it under the doorknob. I lay down, hoping to get at least 6 hours sleep. Rest came fitfully interrupted by creaks and distant thuds. Not long after I was jolted awake by a soft scraping sound. I turned around groggy. The noise continued, and the man clink followed by a gentle rattle. It was coming from the door. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, and I sat up, heart pounding. A chair under the doorknob vibrated slightly with each movement from the other side. Someone was trying to open the door. I reached for my phone, hands trembling, and dialed the front desk, but they didn't answer. I tried again. The scraping intensified, a deliberate sound. It wasn't a key. It was like metal against metal. And as I said before, this door needed a key card. Panic surged. I dialed 911 and was putting all my weight against the chair, whispering my location to the dispatcher. She reassured me. The officers were on their way, instructing me to remain silent and concealed. I was conflicted. Should I guard the door's integrity? What was my next move? Crouching behind the bed, phone clutched, my eyes were glued to the door. There truly was no safe haven for me. A glance out the window confirmed that a fall from that height would likely result in a broken leg. Minutes, which stretched into hours, defined my limited options. The doorknob jiggled, accompanied by the slow scrape of the chair with each attempt. Then silence. I held my breath, listening intently. A shadow passed beneath the door, followed by retreating footsteps down the hallway. Just then, a firm, authoritative voice reached me, giving me the courage to move the chair. I cautiously opened the door and peeked out, seeing two police officers speaking with the receptionist. They escorted me to the lobby, where I recounted the ordeal. The officers reviewed security footage, which revealed a man loitering near my door, attempting to pick the lock with a large knife. He fled just before their arrival. Understandably, I left the hotel immediately, shaken and sleep-deprived. The receptionist had the audacity to try and make me pay for the room, not only after the harrowing experience, but also considering the repulsive state it was in. In my sleep-deprived state, on my drive to find another hotel, I reflected on the events, the receptionist's behavior, and the look on his face when the police arrived. Who knows what would have happened had I been a deeper sleeper? But I suppose the moral of this story, if there even is one, is if you know you are going away, book your hotel stays in advance, and your transfers as well. Preferably go by the reviews and try to avoid staying anywhere in desperation. You never know how these situations can come back and bite you in the butt. I was 19 when this happened, new to the overnight shift at a logistics warehouse just outside of my area. The building sat in an industrial dead zones, surrounded by patchy woods and pothole-riddled side roads. And by the time my break rolled around, it was 3 a.m., and I remembered a lone gas station on the drive in a quick trip. It was still lit when I drove by at the start of my shift, so I figured it would be open. I grabbed my keys and told myself I'd be quick. The lot was empty when I pulled in, just buzzing lights, cracked concrete, and a row of unoccupied pumps. But there was a shape, someone seated at a picnic table bolted into the sidewalk near the entrance. I hadn't seen him until my headlights hit his legs. He was sitting perfectly still, hunched in a black windbreaker with the hood drawn tight around his face, facing directly towards my windshield, like he'd been waiting. His head never turned, not even when I shut the engine off. I tried to rationalize it. He's cold, maybe homeless, just warming up under the lights. But there was something about him that felt off. I got out feeling stupid for how fast my heart was pounding, and I told myself I'd be polite, quick, and calm. I glanced, just once. His hands were flat on the table, and I couldn't see his face, but he was breathing heavy, loud enough to hear it over the parking lot hum. Inside the place was empty. No customers, just a bored-looking clerk who barely looked up. When I walked in, I grabbed a bottle of iced tea and an energy drink, trying to slow my thoughts, and I had a terrible gut feeling, that animal sort of instinct that something is watching you. I debated asking the clerk to walk me out. I talked myself out of it. I didn't want to seem dramatic. I paid for a smile and stepped back into the cold. The man was now standing still facing my car, still hooded, and now his head was up, and I could see his face, greasy hair, matted to his cheeks, jaw clenched too tight, and a wide grin stretched unnaturally across his face, like it hurt to maintain it. He said as I passed, but I ignored him. "Hey, you got a boyfriend?" I turned startled. He had stepped closer. His smile deepened. "You just looked like someone who hasn't been taken too pretty not to be." "Yeah, I do." He squinted. "What's his name?" I lied. "Ben's real lucky. Real lucky." I noticed him inching towards my car. I thanked him. Why did I thank him? And I reached for my door. "You think you'd give me a ride somewhere?" he asked. Suddenly I shook my head. "Sorry. No. I have to get back to work." "Why not?" His voice hardened. "I just can't. Sorry." He stepped around the picnic table, and I saw his hands trembling, now twitchy with barely contained frustration. "Look, I'm not some creep. You think I'm dangerous or something?" I didn't answer, opening my door just enough to keep it between us like a shield. "You don't believe me? Here, look at my nieces." He whipped out a battered phone, shoving the screen towards me. It was a wallpaper photo of him with 2 girls, maybe 6 or 7. "See, I'm a good guy. Sorry, I really have to go look." He lunged forward. I dove into my car, yanked the door shut, and slammed the lock button. He was screaming now, pounding the window with one hand, then the other, trying to yank it open. His face was pressed against the glass, red eyes wide and twisted in fury. "What's your problem? I just need a ride." I peeled out of the lot, tires shrieking. I didn't even check for traffic. I didn't stop until I was back at work, shaking, breathless, and crying in the dim warehouse break room. I never reported it, but I should have. I was scared no one would take me seriously. What would I even say? All I know is the man wasn't looking for a ride, and if I said yes, I don't think I would have made it back to work ever. I was 22 and living with a roommate while going to school. My roommate was out clubbing that night, crashing at a friend's place. She'd invited me out, but I wasn't in the mood. I had other plans at TV, homework, junk food, a cozy and uneventful night. It sounded perfect. It must have been around 10:11 p.m. when I decided I needed a sugar fix. So I threw on my hoodie and drove down to the gas station, just a few minutes away from the house. I'd gotten my hair done earlier that day and was feeling good, cute, and confident. The store was nearly empty, except for 3 guys in their 20s, loitering by the callers. One of them nudged the other, nodding at me like I was the punchline to a joke.
I didn't want to hear. They looked like frat boys. One had messy blonde hair, tattoos crawling up his arms. Nothing outwardly threatening, just the kind you instinctively keep a distance from. They paid before I did, and left. I didn't give them much thought, but when I walked back outside, their beat-up car was idling in the lot.
All 3 of them were inside, staring only at me. I got into my car calmly, trying not to show nerves. I backed out and turned towards home. Their car pulled out too. At first, I told myself it was nothing coincidence. They just happened to be going the same way. But after a turn deeper into my quiet neighborhood, they stayed behind me. By the time I'd made the 5th turn, I knew they were following me, and my stomach twisted. I passed my house without slowing down. I wasn't going to show them where I lived, and I leaped back to the main road and kept driving. They stayed close, sometimes speeding up, sometimes lagging, but always there. They flashed their headlights, hit me. Then one of them pulled up beside me, window down for a stupid second. I thought maybe something was wrong with my car. A flat tire, something dragging. But when I looked over, the grins on their faces made my blood turn cold. Predatory. That was the only word for it. Not playfully, not carelessly, but intentionally. I sped up, heart thundering. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone. I didn't want to go to the police station. It was too far, too many red lights, and what if I got stuck at one? I called her, and on the 4th ring, she answered. I didn't even say hello. Is Josh home? A beat of silence. Yeah. Tell him to get his gun and meet me in the driveway now. I hung up before she could ask any questions. As I turned onto her street, one of the assailants hurled something at my car. It bounced off the driver's side window with a loud crack. My pulse pounded so loudly, I could barely hear. I tore into my sister's driveway and froze. The lights were dead. Were they even home? Their car boxed me in before I could reverse. Doors opened and feet hit the gravel. All three of them were coming towards me. One yanked on the driver's side door handle. Another tried the back. The third was already moving to the passenger side. I remember locking eyes with the blonde tattooed one. He was inches away, just glass between us. His expression was empty. Not rage, not excitement, just cold, like he'd done this before. In that moment, I froze. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I couldn't. Suddenly, from the darkness behind them, a huge bang broke the silence, and a deep, furious voice said, "Get away from her." It was Josh. He stepped out from the shadows, gum raised steady for sure. He hadn't turned on any lights, and he hadn't shouted a warning. He'd crept up around the side of the house and waited, and now he was staring these men down with every intention of pulling the trigger, if necessary. The three turned to run without a word, scrambled back into their rust bucket of a car, and shouting threats and curses as they tore down the street. When they were gone, my sister ran outside and helped me out of the car. I could barely walk. My knees gave out on the front steps. We called the police. No license plate, no real leads, just three predators in a crappy car who were out looking for someone to disappear. They never caught them to this day. I wonder what they were planning, what would have happened if I'd gone straight home, or if Josh hadn't been there standing in the shadows with a loaded gun, whatever it was.
I don't think they were trying to scare me. I think they meant to kill me. And I think they done.
Several years ago, I had a very quick trip to Denver, planned 23 hours total to visit a friend before they moved away. I was young, broke, and working crappy entry-level job, so it was the best I could do with my one day off. I went straight from work to the airport and got into DIA around 11 hours p.m. I was bunking on the couch of an old college friend, and they lived between 30 to 40 minutes from the airport. Fortunately, the light rail had recently been extended out to the airport, and my friend lived near the light rail line. I had taken the light rail often when I was in Denver myself, but was not familiar with the new chillers. I barely made it to the train before it set off, grateful to not have to wait around for another half hour. At that time of night, it was nearing midnight, as the train pulled into a brightly lit uni station. I looked around for my connection, but it was nowhere to be found, not realizing the connecting line was not there. Fortunately, I was able to flag down security, and they pointed me in the right direction. A few blocks away, there was another brightly lit station separated by roughly 200 yards. Unlike the stations, there were hardly any lights, just some lights spilling in from either side where the train platform stood. I was only traveling with a backpack, so I was able to move quickly, moving out of Union Station and towards the other platform, hoping I was going to make my next train. As I got further away from the station and my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I noted a large figure standing in the middle of the sidewalk ahead of me. I quickly gauged my surroundings and realized there were no other paths unless I walked in the road. Attitude as I drew closer, I could make out a tall, muscular man, probably in his 20s or 30s. And as I got closer, I made eye contact to let him know that I recognized his presence, and he was already staring at me, mumbling to himself. As I passed by him, I could hear what he was mumbling. He was not speaking to me, but instead he was speaking about me. And now as I walked past him, he began to follow me. I walked fast, and he sped up his pace, too. All the while he was saying things like, "Oh, look at that body. Oh, she's so fine. I'm gonna feel that body, along with other sexual and crude comments about me, all being muttered to himself. The second station was still another 100 yards or so away, and there was nowhere I could go in between.
I built up my cell phone and rang my dad, desperate for him to answer the call. Went to voicemail, but I pretended he had picked up. As soon as I began talking, the man spoke to me for the first time and said, "Oh girl, what didn't mean, and the footsteps faded back. I kept up the fake conversation for a moment longer, before looking back, and he was nowhere to be found.
Like I mentioned previously, I had looked around for places I could escape and couldn't find any. I am confident with his size. If he had done anything, I would not have stood a chance. I burst into the light of the station, barely made my train, and ultimately missed my stop because I was so shaken up and had to ride the train back around, and finally rested my head on a pillow, my friends at around 2000 am. Moral of the story, never travel alone at night, and whoever the disappearing man in the street was, it's safe to say I'd rather never make his acquaintance again. A few years ago, I rented a one-bedroom apartment from a friend who had recently bought and renovated it. He was trying to sell the place, but with no buyers in sight. I offered to rent it short-term. It was modern, freshly painted, and cheap. I didn't ask too many questions. I just needed a place to stay. I had no idea what I was moving into. From the very first night, I noticed something strange about the woman living next door. She looked like she was in her 40s, but her skin sagged like old leather, and her hair was matted and dull, and her voice carried and slurred. Now every night, without fail, she would stay up until dawn, listening to Christian radio shows, sermons, prayers, dramatic readings, and she'd talk back to them loudly, like she was arguing or chanting along with voices only she could hear. After about a week of sleepless nights, I decided to confront her. I knocked on her door just after 11 p.m. The radio was blaring scripture about demons and hellfire. When she finally opened up, her apartment was different. Every inch of all space was covered in frantic hand-painted crosses in clashing colors, crimson black, sickly yellow, and words were quilled between them in childlike loops and frantic scratches. Jesus' angels, do not let them in fire. Cleanses, he watches. The windows were painted completely black from the inside. No curtains, just thick tar, like strokes of acrylic, sealing out all light. The carpet was ancient, stained, dark yellow with something that reeked of mold and dog piss. Cockroaches skittered along the threshold, and there was actual dog feces mashed into the fibers of the carpet, but no dog I could see. She stared at me as I stood there in disbelief, and I asked her very politely to keep the volume down. She didn't say a word. She looked at me and slowly closed the door with a loud creak and then a click. About 3 seconds later, the radio turned up, even louder. The next night, my girlfriend came to stay over. I figured we'd sleep with a white noise machine to block out the sound. The voice said, a woman's voice, raspy, cold, and familiar. I bolted upright. It was her, my neighbor, standing 2 feet from me inside my bedroom. She was holding something. I couldn't see it clearly, but it was long and black with a handle. I froze. My girlfriend stirred behind me, still half asleep, before I could say anything. She turned around and walked silently out of the room. The front door creaked as it shut behind her. We hadn't locked it. The next morning, I barely slept. I kept replaying it in my head, unsure if what had really happened. But when I got up and checked the door, the latch was unhooked. It wasn't a dream. She had come in, She had stood over our bed, watching around noon. I heard strange noises outside the bedroom window, low rhythmic chanting. I looked outside, and it was her. She was squatting beneath my window, rocking back and forth, muttering in some broken guttural language that I didn't understand. Her clothes were filthy and soaked in sweat, and in her hands, hanging loosely from a plastic shopping bag, was the rotting corpse of a dog, its head lolled limply, its mouth open, and they could smell it from the second story. I slammed the blind shut and called the police. A neighbor upstairs answered his door. When I went to warn him, and his face went pale when I mentioned her, she broke into here once too. He told me I was watching TV with my kids and got up to get popcorn. And when I came back, she was behind the couch, just standing there, holding a power drill. That's when it clicked. That's what she'd been holding when she stood over me, a power drill. I couldn't stop shaking. I called the cops again. They already knew who I was talking about. She's off her meds, the dispatcher said almost wily. We've dealt with her before, but she owns the apartment and we can't enter unless she lets us. We'll have to wait until she steps outside. So I waited, or sat in a chair by the window for 2 full nights. Lights off, doors locked, a kitchen knife on my lamp. Every tiny noise outside made my heart pound. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just watched and waited for her to leave. Finally, at 2:17 a.m. on the third night, I saw her shuffling towards the 7-Eleven across the street, cigarette hanging from her lips, bag clutched in her hand, and I dialed the police frantically. They were there in 2 minutes, 3 cruisers, and a psychiatric transport van. She didn't resist. She smiled when they cuffed her, as if she'd been waiting for them. And then she was gone the whole way. Outside, her apartment smelled like rot for weeks. The carpets were never replaced, and I moved out a month later. I still have nightmares waking up in the middle of the night, cold sweat running down my spine, imagining her standing over me in the dark. This happened in the summer of 2022, just 2 months after I bought my first home, a remote, crumbling farmhouse in the heart of rural France. It sat on a patch of land so isolated you could scream yourself hoarse and no one would hear. The only nearby soul was an elderly woman who owned the adjoining half of the property. I barely knew her. I was 28, alone and more or less broken the very day I moved in. I fractured my right hand. A month later, my horse spooked during a storm, reared up and accidentally smashed my nose. That summer, I healed beneath gores and bruises sweltering under the oppressive heat of the countryside that felt almost haunted. My bedroom was a converted attic space, with low beams and creaking pine boards warped from decades of temperature swings. I slept half naked most nights, the heat too thick to bear anything more than underwear and bandages. That night, a storm had rolled in from the west, thick with thunder rain lashing against the old roof. It was 11:30 p.m. when I awoke, not to thunder, but a sound. It came from the second room, just beyond the thin wall beside my bed. At first it was subtle, the weight of a body shifting on old wooden boards too heavy and rhythmic to be the wind. I froze. The pain in my hand flared as I instinctively reached towards the nightstand for a weapon, but there was none. If I didn't make this clear before, I live alone. No one should be in that room. The only access to that room, besides going through mine, is an exterior door that opens onto a steep staircase leading to the overgrown backyard. That door is old, swollen from rain and disuse, and it rarely opens without a fight. I personally hadn't touched it since moving in. I told myself I was imagining it, The creaking, the presence, the dread sitting heavy in my chest. But something primal insisted I'd get up and check, so I did, limping from bed, nursing the dull ache of my injuries. Still half-dressed and slick with sweat, I investigated, and the second room was empty, or at least appeared to be. So the door to the attic, unfinished section, the one that led outside, was wide open, wind funneled through it in a low moan, lifting dust and swirling eddies across the floor. I stepped carefully towards it. The shadows beyond that led up to a raised mezzanine, a kind of open loft space filled with junk and nestling birds. It was dark, uneven, and not a place you'd want to be barefoot. In the middle of a storm, I reached the top step just in time to see something move, a silhouette ducking low, hiding beneath the platform, just out of reach of the lightning's brief illumination, and every hair on my body stood up. I didn't want to confirm it. I turned and ran, nearly falling back down the stairs, and rushed into my room. The door didn't lock. None of them did. The farmhouse was too old, the doors warped and unreliable, and I pressed my back against the wall, eyes locked on the threshold, listening for any sound of footsteps. I picked up my phone and dialed the only person I trusted to come without laughing at me. If someone entered my room, I would climb out and jump. If I had to, I'd rather break my ankle than wait to see what they wanted. No one came. My ex arrived, but not alone, with his 6-year-old daughter too. He hadn't wanted to leave her alone in his neighborhood, so he brought her and left her locked in the car with the engine running. He told her they would just fix plumbing. He didn't want her to be afraid. Together we searched the house room by room, beam by beam. No one. I began to wonder if I'd hallucinated the whole thing, if the storm, the heat, and the isolation had finally made me snap. But then we heard the scream, a child screaming from outside. We sprinted to the front of the house, and his daughter was in the car crying hysterically, pointing towards the door that led to the attic. This same door I had found open. She told us that she saw the man come out of the door, a large man with long arms and dirty clothes. He walked right up to the car, grabbed the door handle, and tried to open it, tugging on it again and again, but it was locked. Whoever he was disappeared before we reached her. Afterwards, I sat awake until dawn, wrapped in a blanket near the window, flashlights still in hand. We filed a police report, but there was no evidence left behind. No footprints in the mud, no fingerprints, nothing. The old woman next door told me it wasn't the first time she said someone had knocked on her door late at night, multiple times, always when it stormed, but she never answered. She was too afraid. To this day, I don't know who the man was, why he was standing next to my bedroom while I slept, or what his real intentions were. I don't know if he meant to hurt me. We will take a child from a locked car in the middle of the storm. All I know is that he was real, and he hasn't been caught. This happened when I was in university. I was renting a flat with 2 other girls just off Carley Road in Oxford. It was a strange mix. Student chaos and old British suburbia on the weekends. It turned into a blur of house parties, pub crawls, and stumbling strangers. And it was a Saturday night in late autumn.
I'd been up with a few friends at a pub and came home at around 2:30 a.m. a bit tipsy, but not too far gone. The house was quiet when I returned. My roommates, Anna and Layla, had mentioned that they might have a few friends over, so I wasn't surprised to see what looked like someone sleeping on the couch in the dark.
I didn't turn the light on. I just paused briefly when I saw the figure lying there. What struck me immediately was how stiff he looked. Arms locked to his sides, leg rigid, not the relaxed sprawl of someone crashed after a few drinks, and his head suddenly turned to face me like a puppet on strings. It was fast and unnaturally smooth,
His eyes were wide open, reflecting the streetlight, slipping in through the window. As sight chilled me, I muttered a quick, sorry, and hurried to my room, locking the door behind me. I figured he was high or drunk or both, but something didn't feel right, and at 4:17 a.m. I woke up to a soft tapping at my door earlier. Whisper. I froze. The tapping got louder, more erratic, like fingernails. Then it turned into full-on scratching, frantic and aggressive, like an animal trying to dig its way in. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe properly. The scratching scraped deep into the wood, fast and relentless. Then the doorknob started to rattle violently. I grabbed my phone and texted Leela.
Hey, is your friend okay? He's at my door, scratching like crazy. Seriously freaking me out. No reply. I messaged Anna the same thing. I couldn't hear anyone else in the house but the scratching and that horrible rattle. After a full minute I gathered the nerve to call Anna, and when she picked up she sounded groggy.
Your friend's scaring the hell out of me. He's outside my door, acting like a lunatic silence, and suddenly awake. And she said, what friend? The guy on the couch. We didn't have anyone over tonight. My stomach dropped. I told her to lock the door and call the police. Suddenly from the far end of the flat, I heard pounding, then screaming, and both Anna and Layla shouting in fear. The guy had moved to their room and was slamming his body against the door. I called 999 and the operators stayed on the line with me as the pounding continued, and then silence. A moment later, something soughed under my door fingers, 4 of them pressing and curling into the room through the gap. Under the door, he started to wiggle them slowly and deliberately, and let out a low guttural growl. I screamed and jumped back. I still regret not grabbing something heavy and smashing those fingers. Minutes later, I heard the sliding door at the back of the flat open and slammed shut. When the police arrived, the man was gone. He'd broken in through the side door by just picking the lock on the floor. They found a pair of heavy scissors he'd used to gouge deep scratches into my bedroom door. They never caught him. It still haunts me that I locked eyes with him. He wasn't passing out or high. He was pretending to sleep, hiding. He must have heard me come in and try to blend into the shadows, hoping I wouldn't notice. I walked right past him. He was probably less than a meter away from me. Someone who was planning to hurt me and do who knows what to me. I'm sort of glad I never found out more about him, if he was incredibly dangerous or what, and just try and put that part of my life behind me. This happened yesterday night. I just stopped at a grimy little gas station on the edge of a rough neighborhood. I used to live near there years ago, and remembered the constant sound of sirens and shouting late at night. People who seem to vanish for days and reappear, hollowed out. I escaped that environment 2 years ago, but yesterday I was back, just passing through. I had a few snacks in my backpack, chips, a bottle of juice, nothing valuable. As I walked along the broken sidewalk, street lamps finally began to sputter to life. That's when I noticed someone ahead walking towards me. A man, he's only a couple of inches taller than me, wearing a green jacket with the hood up, fair skin, average build.
I couldn't make out much else.
His face was half shadowed by the low light and his hood, but something about the way he moved made me feel uneasy. He wasn't just walking, he was angling towards me. I tried to brush past him to keep moving, like I didn't notice him, but he stepped in front of me just enough to slow me down. His voice was flat, almost emotionless. "What's in your backpack?" I didn't answer, just kept walking. I didn't want travel, but he followed close and grabbed the strap of my bag, yanking me backwards hard. I said, "What's in the bag?" I spun around, adrenaline kicking in. I tried reasoning with him. Told him he could have the food if he was hungry. I offered it freely. I just didn't want this to escalate. But he didn't care. He wasn't listening. He just kept jerking the bag, trying to wrestle it from my shoulders. And his grip was rough and desperate. I fought back. I wasn't gonna let it go that easily. Not just because of the contents, but because it was mine. The street was empty, except for passing cars. A few drove by, slowed slightly, then sped up again. Not one person stopped to help. I could see them glancing at us through their windows, eyes flickering away like I was a stray dog, fighting over trash. I was alone. My stomach dropped. I know what that usually meant. A weapon, a knife, a gun, possibly. And my body turned up, heart pounding in my ears, trying to calculate how fast I could run and whether I could dodge if he lunged. But it wasn't a weapon. At least not the kind I expected. He pulled out his bare fist and slammed it down onto mine again and again. The pain was hot and immediate. Burn-on-burn impact each blow, jarring through my hand, ripping the skin, bruising the knuckles. I tried to hold on, tried to twist away from him, but it was no use. My strength gave out. My hand was bleeding, numb, and useless. I couldn't take another hit, so I let go. He snatched the bag and ran just like that. I stood there on the sidewalk, chest heaving, blood dripping from my hand, watching him vanish into the dark. All of that for some junk food, a bag of chips, a bottle of juice. It wasn't about what was in the bag. It was about control. He wanted to take something from me. And he did. I walked the rest of the way home, cradling my hand, flinching every time I heard footsteps behind me, even when no one was there. My eyes were tuned into every sound. My body braced for him to come back, but he never did. I didn't report it. I knew it wouldn't go anywhere. I could barely describe the guy. Green jacket, bare ski, an average height. That's nothing. Cops would have nothing to go on. So now I'm back at work, my hand bandaged and swollen, doing the best I can to get through the day, while it throbs and stings with every movement. People ask what happened. I tell them I slipped, or shut it in the door. The truth feels too meaningless. I think about the way he looked at me like I was nothing more than an obstacle. I hope someday he tries it with the wrong person, and hope it makes him feel what I felt, trapped and powerless. But above all else, I wish I'd have just stayed home.
About 8 months ago, I finally moved out of my mom's house and into my own place. I was excited, proud, even, and for the first few months, everything was great, quiet, and peaceful. That's when I began getting weird phone calls. No one spoke on the other end, just heavy breathing. Sometimes they'd hang up and flowers arrived.
No name, no note, and that creeped me out a little bit. But I figured it was just some harmless admirer. Easy to believe, right? I brushed it off. That is until things began to go missing. At first it was small stuff from the kitchen. A mug of coffee, half a bottle of wine. I swore I hadn't finished, and I began unplugging the TV before bed just to ease my mind. But then I'd wake up and find it on channels, changed volume, slightly adjusted, not exactly the kind of thing you want to find when you live alone. I stopped going downstairs at night. My bedroom became a bunker, a cage, and I locked myself in. After sundown, I convinced myself I was just tired, maybe a little paranoid. But then something happened that I couldn't explain away. I had this AV transmitter installed, so I could stream my downstairs cable up to my bedroom TV. One night, I woke up to hear it buzzing. When I turned it on, someone was flipping through the channels live, like someone was using my remote downstairs.
That was my breaking point. A few days later at a family party, I told my brother everything. I have expected him to laugh it off and tell me I was imagining it, And he kind of did, but I must have looked convincing enough, because he offered to stay with me for a few nights with our younger brother tagging.
Along the time they stayed, nothing happened. Not a sound, not a flicker of the TV. My brother started to think I was spooked and overreacting. I couldn't really blame them. Part of me wanted to believe it too, that it was all in my head. They left, and I felt exposed. 2 nights later, at 10:30 p.m., he came back. I awoke to footsteps downstairs. The person wasn't even trying to be quiet anymore, and I could hear the TV. I was frozen, phone in hand, whispering through tears to my brother, "Someone's in the house." I was shaking so hard, I could barely breathe, and my brother kept me on the phone. The entire drive. He only lives 10 minutes away. When he pulled up, he saw our younger brother already waiting in his car. They met around the back of the house, keeping quiet. I'll never forget what he said next. He went silent for a moment, and then said, "He's in your living room. Don't move. Stay in your room." My heart dropped. I think part of me wanted to be crazy, but hearing him say that made it all real. He hung up to call the police. I begged him not to, but he had to. He called me back on my cell, and it wasn't on silent. I fumbled to mute it, but it was too late. I slammed the phone down, heart pounding in my throat, and pressed my ear to the door. A minute later, I heard the patio door creak open. It always sticks. I thought it was safe, and I opened my door just a crack and saw a man, a long black trench coat and a baseball cap, walking up the stairs. I slammed the door shut and pushed my wardrobe in front of it, as quietly as I could, tears streaming down my face. I didn't even recognize him, just a shadow climbing the stairs to get to me. Then I heard my brothers crash through the house. There was a struggle, yelling, thudding, and a man's voice carrying out, "I'm sorry, please." When I moved the wardrobe to open the door, I saw my younger brother standing over him, holding a knife that the guy had dropped. The police showed up about 10 minutes later. Honestly, that man could have killed me 10 times over before they arrived, and the thought still haunts me. The biggest shock, the man was our mom's ex-boyfriend, a guy who had lived with us for a short time in the 90s. He used to call himself our stepdad, though he was never officially anything. He was always too fond of me, but I was just a kid.
I never imagined he'd come back into my life like that. He had been sneaking into my house for weeks, months, perhaps watching me living in the walls of my life. I don't know how many nights I slept. While he stood just a floor beneath me, he was arrested. They found a knife in his coat pocket, and he only served 5 months before being paroled.
The justice system didn't exactly treat it like the horror show it was. He was ordered to live in a halfway house and be back by 8:00 p.m. every night. Then one day we got a call. They'd found him dead. He took his life in his wardrobe. My mom called me to tell me, and still part of me mourned him even after everything. I was 26 at the time. I'm a woman living in Alaska, and it was a Saturday night at around 11 p.m. Italy, cold, maybe 10 degrees below zero. I'd just finished a long shift at work and was running on fumes, both figuratively and literally. My gas tank was nearly empty, so I pulled into a local station on my route home. It was one of the busiest stations in town, typically buzzing even late into the night. But as I pulled up, something felt off. The lot was completely empty. Not a single other car at any of the pumps, just still quiet and frozen. That alone should have been my cue to keep driving, but I was tired, running low, and figured I'd be in and out in a minute or two. Normally I start the pump and sit in my car to warm up before the gas flows. It's standard for most people in this kind of cold, but that night, something kept me outside. Call it a gut feeling. This heavy silent tug in my chest that told me to stay alert. I stayed standing beside the pump arms crossed, watching the frost form on the side mirrors as the fuel climbed. A few seconds later, a little golden sedan pulled into the spot directly beside mine. That was strange. The entire station was empty, so I park right next to me. A man stepped out of the driver's side. He was a big, broad, burly, the kind of wilderness scruffy you only see in places like Alaska. His jacket was worn, hood up, and his eyes partially shadowed. There was something about him that immediately put me on edge. He didn't pump gas. Instead, he grabbed the squeegee and started wiping down his already spotless windows. That act was oddly deliberate, like he was buying time, watching me from the corner of his eye. I kept one eye on him as my gas ticked upward, my other hand buried in my coat pocket, fingers hovering over my phone. When he put the squeegee back, he didn't get into his car. He began walking towards me. I didn't flinch, just stared ahead, trying to appear casual. He stopped a few feet away and asked if I could help him pour windshield wiper fluid into his car. He said he'd run out and didn't know how to open the hood. I laughed, light and dismissive, and lied. "I'm sorry. I don't know how to either." He chuckled and took another step closer. "Well, there's something under the passenger seat I can't reach. Mine helped me out. I'm a bit too big to get it." That's when it clicked. This wasn't just a cirque, chilly, awkward guy making small talk. He was trying to lure me into his car. I'm only 5'2", petite, exactly. The kind of person someone like him could overpower in seconds. Every hair on my neck stood on end. I stayed, still kept my tone light, but my thumb slid towards the red cool button on the pump, and I pressed it. He stopped advancing immediately to calf, a step back, turned slowly, and began walking towards his car. My heart was stunning, so loudly it drowned out the hiss of the gas nozzle, and as I reached for the pump to finish up, I glanced inside his vehicle, and that's when a new terror set in. Every interior door handle, except the driver's, was gone. Just bare plastic where it should have been. That was that was a trap. Finally breaking free, he grabbed my arm and shoved me hard against the side of my car, knocking the wind straight out of me. My body moved on instinct. I drove my elbow into his ribs with every ounce of strength I had, then screamed loudly over and over again until my throat burned. That's when the gas station attendant appeared. Thank God he came out from the building, holding a huge gun. That was all it took. The man released me, stumbled back, and bolted for his car, and peeled out of the station. In seconds, tires screeching over the icy pavement. The attendant wasted no time. He got me inside, pulled the security footage, and helped me file a police report. I was still trembling, barely able to speak. I called the police immediately, gave them a full description of the man, his vehicle, and everything I could remember. And it was the last I ever heard of it. They never followed up. I never found out who he was, and I still don't know if they caught him. The worst part, I don't know if he tried it again with someone who didn't get away. Hey guys, it's Morty, and thank you so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed these stories. I certainly did. A huge thank you to my members and patrons, whose names can be seen on screen. Now they get some funky perks, and if you'd like to find out what those are, feel free to follow the links in the description.